I never thought a single photograph could change everything. It started innocently enough, a casual family gathering in the living room. My parents insisting we take a group photo because my grandparents were visiting. I was 25, living in a tiny apartment downtown, juggling work I didn't love with friends I barely saw, and somehow, this little domestic scene felt more like an obligation than a memory worth capturing. My older sister, Myra, was buzzing around, reminding everyone to straighten their collars, adjust sleeves, fix hair. She always had that energy, the kind that makes you feel lazy just standing still. And then there was me, slouching on the couch, trying to look like I belonged, trying not to be the awkward gap in the picture. My mom had already gone on about how flattering this dress would look on Myra. The bright, floral print, soft chiffon, the one she claimed just worked with the lighting. I had no idea why she suddenly paused and looked at me with a strange glint in her eyes. "You know," she said lightly, almost laughing, "you could try it too. Just for the photo." I froze. Me. In a dress. I had always been the son in the family, the one expected to be strong, practical, reliable. My dad would raise an eyebrow at even the suggestion of eyeliner. I opened my mouth, probably to protest, to say something sharp, but something in her tone made me stop. It wasn't mockery, it was curiosity, encouragement, almost a dare. Myra's eyes sparkled like she had been waiting for this moment. My heart started thumping, a mix of fear and something I couldn't quite name, a thrill curling in my chest. I don't even remember how it happened. Maybe it was the collective coaxing of my mom and sister, maybe it was the way Myra handed me the delicate fabric, saying, "Trust me, you'll look amazing." Maybe it was the odd, intoxicating freedom of just trying. Before I knew it, I was in my bedroom, fumbling with the chiffon dress, my hands trembling as the silky material slid over my arms. The mirror was unforgiving, but also strangely honest. My reflection was me, but not me. Softer, brighter, unrecognizable in a way that made my chest tighten. My heart raced, not with embarrassment, but with this strange, startling realization that maybe this softness, this curve, this lightness, was a side of me I had never allowed to breathe. By the time I emerged, my mom clapped softly, eyes wide with delight. Myra gasped in genuine awe. Even my dad, who had been perched in his usual spot on the armchair, seemed to blink, momentarily stunned. "Well," he said finally, "I guess we'll see how it looks in the photo." And just like that, the atmosphere shifted. The camera clicked, and I laughed nervously, but it wasn't the kind of forced laugh I always used when I wanted to hide. It felt real. That first photo, with me in a dress, my family around me smiling as though nothing was strange, felt like a secret kept just between us. I went to bed that night with my thoughts spinning. Part of me was terrified. What would my friends say? My colleagues? What did it mean about me that I enjoyed the feel of that dress, the way it framed my body, the way my reflection didn't feel wrong? But another part of me, a louder, insistent part, whispered that this was mine, that it felt like a key had been turned inside me, a door I never knew existed had swung open. And that photo. That one, simple, ridiculous, yet magical photo. It captured more than just a moment. It captured possibility. The next morning, life went on like nothing had happened. Breakfast was the usual chaos of spilled coffee, arguments about the news, my dad grumbling about traffic. But there was a subtle shift in the air. Myra tossed me a wink across the table when she thought I wasn't looking. My mom hummed while pouring tea, her eyes meeting mine in a way that felt conspiratorial. And somewhere deep inside me, the thought lingered. Maybe the world didn't have to be rigid, maybe who I was didn't have to be boxed in. That day, at work, I kept replaying the image of the dress, of myself in it. I imagined tiny tweaks. What if the next time I tried a different color, or added a scarf, or experimented with makeup? The thrill was electric, almost dangerous, and I had to suppress a grin in my cubicle as I considered how easily a single photograph had unraveled the rules I'd thought were fixed forever. And yet, at the same time, fear clawed at me. What if I went too far? What if someone found out? What if my dad realized I was enjoying this more than I should? A week later, Myra cornered me in the hallway with a new idea. "Let's do another photo," she said casually, but her tone was sharp with purpose. "This time, you can really explore it. Don't just try the dress, own it. I stared at her, heart thudding, unsure if I should laugh or run. She looked serious, almost pleading, and something inside me, a side I hadn't dared nurture, flared to life. I nodded, almost imperceptibly. And in that moment, something shifted between us. This wasn't just a silly experiment anymore. It was becoming a ritual, a secret space where I could breathe differently, see myself differently, and, terrifyingly, maybe even begin to like what I saw. The day of the second photo shoot, we transformed the living room into a studio. My mom fussed with lighting, Myra curated outfits, and I found myself hesitating in front of the mirror, wondering if I was ready to step fully into this other version of me. I chose a sleek, pastel dress this time, with a subtle shimmer that caught the light in the corner of the room. I ran my hands along the fabric, heart hammering, and for the first time, I felt beautiful. The camera clicked, and when I looked at the preview on my phone, I gasped. This wasn't just a photo. This was proof. Proof that I could exist in this form without ridicule, without shame, and maybe even with joy. By the time my grandparents left, the photographs were stacked in an album, each one documenting a tiny, shocking rebellion against who I had thought I was. My dad made no comment, only glanced at me with a faint, unreadable smile. My mom whispered, "You look wonderful," and Myra hugged me tightly. And I realized, with a thrill that bordered on panic, that life as I had known it, the rigid, unyielding expectations, the invisible armor I had worn, was quietly shifting. Family photos in dresses weren't just a momentary joke anymore. They were becoming our new normal. After that first album was filled, our little ritual became strangely addictive. At first, I told myself it was just for fun, a quirky family hobby. But every time I slipped into a dress, adjusted my hair, or applied just a touch of mascara, I felt a flicker of something I had been starving for my entire life, a sense of authenticity. The problem was, authenticity was terrifying. Every fiber of my upbringing screamed that a man's worth was measured in stoicism, toughness, and practicality. Dresses, laughter, softness, these were alien. Yet, in the glow of the living room lights, under the click of the camera, I felt a rush of liberation so intense I could barely breathe. Myra took over as our self-appointed stylist and director, and she was merciless, but in the best way. She would critique my posture, adjust hems, and fuss over hairpins with a precision that made me squirm and delight at the same time. She wanted me to move differently, speak differently, even hold my hands differently. At first, I resisted, half out of embarrassment, half out of fear, but slowly, I began to understand that these weren't just movements. They were rituals, a form of expression that awakened a side of me I hadn't dared acknowledge. My parents, surprisingly, embraced it quietly. My mom's encouragement was soft, never pushy, but unmistakable. My dad's silence was louder, in a strange way, but there were moments, fleeting glances, a subtle nod, that told me he was watching, absorbing, perhaps even understanding. And me. I was learning to watch myself too. Not just in the mirror, but in the way my posture changed, how my shoulders softened, how I moved through the world when I allowed this other version of myself to emerge. One afternoon, Myra had a new idea. Family photo, but outside, she said, her eyes gleaming with that dangerous mix of excitement and mischief. We'll go to the park, pick the perfect light, maybe even make it a mini adventure. I swallowed hard, heart racing. Public exposure. The thought of people seeing me like this, me in a dress, makeup, soft hair swaying in the breeze, was equal parts thrilling and paralyzing. But I couldn't deny the pull. I nodded, and the preparation began in earnest. We chose outfits carefully this time, coordinating colors, textures, and styles. I wore a pale lavender dress with delicate embroidery along the hem, a style completely foreign to me yet somehow mesmerizing. My mom fussed over my shoes, insisting they matched the mood, and Myra draped a scarf loosely around my shoulders to add a hint of elegance. Every detail mattered. And as I looked in the mirror, I felt a pang of fear. I looked exposed, different, almost fragile. But when Myra smiled and whispered, "You look incredible," a warmth spread through me, and I realized I wanted to step outside, to be seen, to exist fully in this moment. The walk to the park was surreal. I felt hyper-aware of every passerby, every glance, every whisper of curiosity. My heartbeat thumped in my ears, but instead of shame, there was an odd pride. We found a secluded spot under a canopy of trees, the light filtering through the leaves in golden patterns. The camera clicked, and for the first time, I felt like the world was holding its breath with me. Each photo captured a nuance, a tilt of the head, a flicker of the eyes, a laugh that slipped out unguarded. My family laughed too, entirely at ease, and I realized something profound. These moments weren't just about me. They were about us, our bonds, our willingness to embrace imperfection, strangeness, and joy. When we returned home, the photos were immediately loaded onto the computer. I hovered, heart pounding, as the first images appeared. I hardly recognized myself. The person in the dress, soft, glowing, alive, was me, yet not the me I had carried all these years. I felt exposed, but also triumphant. Myra leaned over, pointing to one image where my shoulders were relaxed, my smile effortless. "See? That's you. Not pretending. Just you." That night, alone in my room, I stared at the photos on my phone. I felt a tidal wave of emotion, fear, excitement, guilt, exhilaration, all blending into something I couldn't quite name. What did this mean? Was I just experimenting, or was I discovering who I truly was? The thought terrified me more than I cared to admit. What if this version of me couldn't coexist with the one my father expected? What if friends, colleagues, the world, rejected me? Yet, at the same time, a seed had been planted, a quiet insistence that this self, delicate and daring, deserved to exist. Over the next few weeks, our family photos became a ritual. We experimented with themes, colors, settings. Sometimes it was whimsical, picnics with floral dresses and sun hats. Sometimes it was elegant, almost cinematic, with evening gowns, soft lighting, and careful makeup. And each time, I felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Each photo felt like a confession, a secret shared between the lens and my family. But the tension was always there, lurking. In quiet moments, I wondered how far I could take it. Could I wear this in public, beyond the controlled environment of our living room or park? Could I exist like this without shame? The answer was unclear, but the pull was irresistible. Every click of the shutter reinforced a truth I couldn't ignore. I was changing, whether I wanted to or not. And so, our new normal was born, not in a single dramatic moment, but in countless quiet ones. Each photo, each dress, each whispered compliment, each subtle nod of approval from my parents, nudged me further along a path I never imagined I'd walk. It was terrifying, thrilling, and utterly addictive. I was becoming someone I had never met before, and yet, somehow, I felt more myself than ever. It wasn't long before our little ritual started spilling over into spaces I never imagined. One weekend, Myra suggested we try something bolder. "Let's take the photo downtown," she said, eyes sparkling. "The city lights, the reflections on the buildings, it'll be amazing. You'll love it." My stomach twisted. Downtown meant people, strangers, judgment. My heart screamed no, yet another, stranger part of me, a part one didn't even know existed, throbbed with anticipation. Maybe this was a chance to test myself, to see if the thrill I felt at home could survive in the open air. The morning of the outing, I found myself standing in front of the mirror longer than ever. I wore a soft pink dress, fitted just enough to feel elegant but not overt, paired with flats that made me feel grounded despite the unfamiliarity of heels. My hair fell in loose waves, and Myra had convinced me to try a touch of blush and a hint of lip color. I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. There was a vulnerability, yes, but also a strange courage, a tentative confidence that had been building in secret for weeks. The city was alive. People rushed past, indifferent, or so I hoped. Every reflection in the shop windows caught my attention, each one a mirror of this fragile, startlingly new version of myself. Myra led the way, confidently snapping photos, laughing as if nothing were unusual. I followed, shuffling slightly, my pulse spiking with every passerby's glance. The tension was electric, a mix of fear and exhilaration that left me dizzy and, somehow, giddy. We found the perfect spot, a quiet plaza between two glass towers, the light reflecting off the buildings in golden slants. I posed awkwardly at first, but Myra's guidance was relentless. She adjusted my shoulders, tilted my chin, whispered instructions about where to look, how to smile. And then something miraculous happened. I stopped thinking. I stopped worrying. I moved naturally, laughed freely, and the camera captured me in a way I had never thought possible. I looked alive. Whole. The thrill didn't end when we returned home. That evening, my mom insisted we review the photos together. We gathered around the laptop, and I felt a mixture of pride and terror as the first image appeared. I gasped. The city lights, the soft pink dress, my reflection captured in dozens of angles, it was breathtaking. It wasn't just the image itself, but what it represented. I had stepped out into the world as this version of myself and survived. More than survived, I had shined. The photos marked a turning point. They weren't just a record of a moment anymore. They were proof that this side of me could exist, that I could exist outside the safety of home. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, my mindset shifted. I began experimenting more boldly. Shorter skirts, brighter colors, subtle accessories. Each time, the thrill mixed with fear, but the fear became part of the excitement, like the pulse before a roller coaster drops. At work, the change was harder to hide. I didn't dress openly, of course, but the confidence I felt bled into everything. I carried myself differently, smiled more freely, spoke with a softer, more deliberate tone. People noticed. Some commented on my posture, my subtle grooming, the way I seemed lighter somehow. I laughed it off, claiming I had discovered a new skincare routine, but inside, I was bursting with secrets I couldn't speak aloud. One evening, Myra suggested we try something even more audacious, a mini fashion show at home. She set up an impromptu runway in the living room, lights, mirrors, everything. I stood backstage, heart hammering, my newest dress clinging delicately, the fabric shimmering under the warm glow of the lamps. "You're going to be incredible," Myra whispered. My dad lingered quietly in the background, watching, his expression unreadable. My mom smiled softly. And for the first time, I realized that this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about all of us, about a family willing to bend, to embrace strangeness, to nurture courage. The runway started. I walked tentatively at first, but Myra's cheers, my mom's quiet encouragement, and the faint but unmistakable nod from my dad gave me strength. Each step, each pose, each turn was a revelation. I saw myself as I had never seen before, powerful in softness, brave in vulnerability, radiant in a form that defied all the labels I had grown up with. And when I looked at my family, at their smiles, their pride, their gentle awe, I realized something profound. I was not alone in this journey. Their acceptance was as transformative as the dresses themselves. The next morning, I woke with an odd mixture of fatigue and exhilaration. I stared at my reflection, no dress this time, just my regular clothes, and felt a quiet ache for what had already become a daily ritual. The dresses, the photos, the lights, they weren't just clothing or images. They were invitations into myself, a portal into courage, into identity, into joy. And I knew, with a certainty that made my chest tight, that this was no longer a hobby. This was a revolution of the self. And yet, fear remained, shadowing every bright thought. What if someone saw the photos? What if the world rejected me? What if I grew too attached to this new identity and couldn't reconcile it with the old expectations? The tension was unbearable, but I couldn't stop. Every day, every photo, every moment in a dress deepened the thrill and the terror, intertwining them in ways that left me breathless and dizzy with possibility. By the time the next family photo session rolled around, I was almost eager. I no longer felt awkward stepping into the dress, no longer flinched at the camera's click. I felt alive. I felt free. And as we posed together, laughter spilling into the frames, my heart knew a truth I could no longer deny. Family photos in dresses were not a joke, not a phase. They were becoming our new normal. And for the first time, I was ready to embrace it fully, whatever it meant. The thrill of our new normal carried on for weeks, but life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. One evening, Myra suggested something I hadn't anticipated, a casual outing at a nearby cafe. She insisted it was practice for public confidence. My stomach knotted instantly. Public. Strangers. Eyes that might stare, judge, laugh. I wanted to refuse, but a small, stubborn part of me, the part that had felt alive in dresses at home and in the park, urged me forward. Maybe this was a chance to see if the courage I had nurtured could survive the outside world. I spent the morning preparing. A soft lavender dress, matching scarf, and subtle makeup that Myra had insisted would be just enough. My hands shook as I fastened each button, my mind spinning with 1,000 what ifs. What if someone recognized me from work? What if a friend saw me? What if my father was wrong, and I was just chasing a fantasy that couldn't exist outside our home? When we stepped outside, the city seemed sharper somehow, almost too vivid. People moved past without noticing at first, and I felt a flicker of relief. But every reflective window, every passing glance, set my heart hammering. Myra was radiant, confident, and somehow, by being with her, I felt a fraction braver. We walked, laughed softly, and arrived at the cafe. I noticed the subtle stares, the quiet curiosity of strangers, but instead of shame, a strange pride rose in me. I belonged here, in this moment, in this dress, in this new version of myself. Inside the cafe, the warmth of the lights and the quiet hum of conversation made it feel almost intimate. Myra ordered for both of us, leaving me to sit and observe. I felt exposed but exhilarated, aware that my body and identity were on display, yet somehow shielded by the casual acceptance of those around me who didn't know, who didn't judge. And then, a familiar voice interrupted my thoughts. My coworker, Sam. He was sitting at the corner table with a friend and had spotted us. My stomach dropped, panic surged, and for a fleeting moment, I wanted to vanish. Wow, is that? Sam's words faltered, and I froze. My heart pounded like a drum in my ears. Myra squeezed my hand, whispering, "Breathe. You're okay." I tried to smile, but it felt fragile, brittle. Sam approached cautiously, curiosity shining in his eyes but no malice. "Hey, didn't expect to see you like this," he said awkwardly, unsure where to look. My mind raced. Should I explain? Should I laugh it off? Should I hide? And then, something remarkable happened. I took a deep breath and met his gaze. "Yeah," I said, voice steadier than I felt. "I'm exploring something new. It feels right." His expression shifted, surprise softening into intrigue. "Right," he repeated slowly, nodding. And in that small, unassuming exchange, I realized that courage wasn't about perfection or invisibility. It was about honesty, even when it scared you. After that day, the thrill of public exposure became a strange kind of addiction. I began experimenting more, cafes, small streets, even brief trips to the store. Each outing was a battle with fear and exhilaration, each victory reinforcing a truth I couldn't ignore. This version of me was real, valid, and worth nurturing. And at home, my family continued to be my sanctuary. My mom fussed lovingly over my outfits, Myra's guidance sharpened with every new trial, and even my dad's quiet nods became a subtle reassurance that I wasn't alone in this journey. But the tension wasn't gone. Every photograph, every public appearance, every new style tested boundaries. Mine, my family's, the world's. I discovered that embracing this new identity wasn't just about dresses or makeup. It was about reshaping my understanding of myself, my relationships, and my place in the world. Friendships shifted. Colleagues speculated, sometimes positively, sometimes awkwardly. And I realized that every moment of courage carried a ripple effect, forcing me to confront questions I had avoided for years. Who am I really? What parts of me are negotiable? What parts deserve to exist unapologetically? One night, after a particularly daring outing, I sat alone reviewing the photos on my laptop. The images glowed softly in the dark room, me laughing under the city lights, me adjusting a scarf in the breeze, me with Myra guiding my pose. Each frame was a testament to my transformation, a visual diary of courage and curiosity and revelation. I felt tears prick my eyes. The person in those photos was me, but also someone I had never dared meet before. Vulnerable, radiant, alive. And yet, the shadow of fear lingered. What if I became addicted to this persona and lost myself? What if I relied on the dresses, the photos, the approval too much? But even that fear felt different. It wasn't paralyzing anymore. It was just another layer of the adventure, a challenge to navigate with care and honesty. I realized that transformation isn't just about the surface. It's about the internal shift, the slow unraveling of old expectations, and the careful weaving of something entirely new. As the weeks passed, our family photo sessions became more elaborate. Themes, colors, even props entered the mix. The dresses were no longer occasional experiments. They were symbols of courage, acceptance, and discovery. And I began to understand the deepest truth of all. These photos weren't just capturing me. They were capturing us, my family, bound together by love, curiosity, and the willingness to embrace change. Family photos in dresses had become our new normal, not as a joke or a whim, but as a living testament to who we were, who we could be, and the endless possibilities that awaited when fear was faced with courage. The weeks turned into months, and what had started as a playful experiment had quietly reshaped my life. The dresses, the photos, the rituals, they were no longer a secret only shared within the walls of our home. They had begun to touch every corner of my identity. Some days, the thrill was overwhelming. Some nights, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, heart hammering, wondering if I had gone too far. The fear of judgment, of rejection, of losing the fragile balance I had built, never fully disappeared. But with it came a strange exhilaration, a sense that I was discovering a self I could no longer deny. One afternoon, my mom suggested we invite a few extended family members for a small dinner. "It'll be fun," she said brightly. "They haven't seen us in a while. You can even wear your new dress." My stomach plummeted. My mind raced through 1,000 scenarios. Laughter, whispers, confusion, disapproval. But part of me, the braver part that had grown over months of secret photo sessions, curled with excitement. This was a test, a chance to see if our new normal could survive beyond the walls we had built. The evening arrived. I chose a deep teal dress, elegant but understated, paired with delicate earrings that Myra insisted were non-negotiable. My hair fell in soft waves, my makeup subtle yet intentional. I stared at my reflection, barely recognizing the person in the mirror. There was fear, yes, but also a quiet, steady strength I hadn't known I possessed. The drive to the dinner was a blur of nerves and anticipation, every stoplight and passerby magnifying my anxiety. When we arrived, the initial greetings were warm and casual, but I could feel the undercurrent, the quick glances, the raised eyebrows, the brief pause when eyes met mine. I laughed nervously, careful to appear at ease, while Myra and my mom guided the conversation, filling it with light chatter and reassuring cues. My dad stayed close, a silent anchor beside me. As the evening unfolded, I realized something remarkable. Acceptance wasn't always loud or obvious. Sometimes it was quiet, subtle, woven into the rhythm of ordinary interactions. Halfway through dinner, my cousin, Lena, leaned over, curiosity flashing in her eyes. "So, is this something new?" she asked softly, nodding toward my outfit. My chest tightened. Here it was, the question I had dreaded. But instead of retreating, I exhaled slowly. "Yeah," I admitted, voice steady. "It's a part of me I've been exploring. It feels right." Her eyes widened, and I braced for ridicule, judgment, dismissal. But instead, she smiled, gentle and genuine. "You look happy. That's what matters." The room seemed to shift after that. Conversations resumed with ease. Laughter returned. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a seed of confidence took root. I had faced exposure and survived. Not perfectly. Not without nerves. But with authenticity. And that mattered more than any judgment I could imagine. Yet the journey was far from over. In the weeks that followed, challenges multiplied. Work demanded attention, friends tested boundaries, and small accidents, like leaving a photo visible or a comment overheard, reminded me that the world wasn't always kind to those who defy expectations. Each challenge forced me to confront fear, to navigate judgment, and to redefine what courage meant. One particularly tense evening, I discovered an accidental leak. A coworker had seen one of our public photos. My heart pounded as I imagined the consequences, my mind spiraling through every possible outcome. Whispered rumors, awkward encounters, rejection. But when we spoke, surprisingly, the response was muted curiosity, even admiration. "That's bold," they said, uncertain but sincere. And in that moment, I realized that fear is often louder in our own minds than it is in reality. Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear, it means acting despite it. At home, the family ritual continued. Our photos became more elaborate, more daring, but also more intimate, capturing not just my transformation, but our collective courage, our willingness to embrace strangeness, to accept, to love. The dresses were no longer merely clothing, they were symbols of identity, resilience, and authenticity. Every image, every laugh, every whispered compliment was a thread in a tapestry I was only beginning to understand. And slowly, the most astonishing thing happened. I began to see myself fully, not as someone hiding behind clothes, not as a son or brother in the narrow sense I had always known, but as a complete, multifaceted human being. Vulnerable, strong, curious, and alive. Each photograph, each public outing, each tiny rebellion against expectation brought me closer to a truth I had long resisted. Identity isn't fixed. It evolves. It can be shaped by courage, nurtured by love, and illuminated by honesty. By the time the next family photo session arrived, I no longer hesitated. I chose a vibrant, flowing dress, confident in the way it moved, confident in the way it allowed me to inhabit the world differently. The camera clicked, but this time, I didn't flinch. I moved naturally, laughed genuinely, and felt a deep, unshakable joy. My family mirrored it, my mom's smile warm and steady, Myra's eyes alight with pride, my dad's quiet acknowledgement grounding me. And in that moment, I knew something irrevocable had changed. Family photos in dresses weren't just our new normal. They were a celebration, a declaration, a living testament to courage, love, and the boundless potential of embracing who we truly are. The weeks after that dinner and those daring outings felt different. I moved through life with a new rhythm, a quiet confidence that had been absent for years. The dresses, the photos, the rituals, they weren't just experiments anymore. They were extensions of myself, invitations into a world I hadn't allowed myself to inhabit before. And more than that, they had woven themselves into the fabric of my family's life. What had started as curiosity, even a little mischief, had become something sacred. One Sunday morning, Myra burst into my room with a gleam in her eyes. "Family photo shoot," she announced, breathless. "The backyard. Full theme. You're going to love it." My heart fluttered, the familiar mix of excitement and nervousness returning. I laughed, a little self-conscious, but I didn't hesitate. I picked a soft yellow dress, flowing and light, perfect for the spring sun filtering through the trees. My mom fussed over my hair, gently pinning back loose strands, while my dad lingered in the background, quiet but present. The tension that had always existed between fear and courage was now softer, more manageable, a rhythm I had learned to navigate. The backyard was transformed into a whimsical set, flowers arranged carefully, a small vintage bicycle as a prop, and Myra snapping photos with relentless energy. I moved slowly at first, adjusting, posing, unsure. But as the camera clicked, as sunlight danced across the dress and my hair, something shifted. I stopped thinking about judgment, about fear, about what others might think. I existed in that moment fully, joy radiating from every pore. My family laughed, my mom capturing candid shots on her phone, Myra directing me with delight, and my dad, silent but watching, finally smiled in a way that felt unspoken yet profound. That day, I realized the transformation wasn't just about clothes. It wasn't just about appearances or photos. It was about courage, vulnerability, and the freedom to embrace who I truly was without apology. The dresses had been the catalyst, yes, but the real change had been internal. The slow unraveling of fear, the quiet building of self-respect, the understanding that identity is fluid and deserving of exploration. As the sun set, we gathered on the porch, reviewing the photos on a laptop. Each image captured more than a pose or a color. It captured the evolution of trust, love, and acceptance. I saw myself, alive, radiant, unashamed, and alongside me, my family's faces reflected pride, joy, and unconditional support. For the first time, I truly understood what it meant to belong, not just to my family, but to myself. In the weeks that followed, our photo sessions became a cherished tradition, a celebration rather than a secret. Friends who had been curious were gradually invited, met with laughter and honesty rather than judgment. My co-workers, once uncertain, grew accustomed to my quiet confidence, noting the subtle shift in how I carried myself, how I smiled, how I interacted. And I noticed the biggest change of all, the way I saw myself. I no longer flinched at my reflection or hid behind expectation. I existed fully, in every dress, every smile, every photograph, and it felt complete. The ultimate test came when my father suggested something unexpected. "We should try a professional family portrait," he said one evening, tone casual but deliberate. My heart skipped a beat. Professional. Public. Permanent. I hesitated, fear flickering, but Myra and my mom nudged gently, and my father's quiet resolve was grounding. Maybe this was the final affirmation, the declaration that our new normal wasn't temporary or experimental. It was real. On the day of the portrait, I dressed in a soft, flowing gown, more elaborate than anything I had worn before. My hair and makeup were precise but natural, a reflection of the confidence I had cultivated over months of exploration. Myra directed with enthusiasm, my mom assisted with final touches, and my dad, usually reserved, offered quiet praise and subtle adjustments that made me feel seen and accepted. The studio lights captured more than our faces. They captured our courage, our unity, our journey together. As the camera clicked, I felt a surge of gratitude and wonder. Who I was in that moment, the vulnerable, radiant, authentic version of myself, had become inseparable from the family who nurtured and celebrated me. The photos weren't just memories. They were symbols of trust, bravery, and transformation. I realized that identity is not fixed, fear is not final, and acceptance is the most powerful gift one can offer, to others and to oneself. When the final image appeared on the screen, I couldn't stop smiling. There we were, a family, in dresses, radiant, alive, unashamed, laughing softly. Every fold of fabric, every gesture, every glance captured months of growth, exploration, and love. And in that single, enduring photograph, I saw more than myself. I saw courage, possibility, and the quiet revolution that had begun in our living room and had now become our new normal. From that day on, family photos in dresses were no longer a novelty or a secret experiment. They were our way of living openly, honestly, joyfully. They were a reminder that transformation isn't just about appearance, it's about the slow, deliberate act of embracing authenticity, navigating fear, and finding the courage to be seen. And as I looked at my reflection that evening, I realized something profound. The person in the mirror, the one I had been afraid to meet, wasn't just beautiful in a dress. She was me. Fully, unconditionally, and forever.